Welcome. I'm Kinetic Symphony. I hunt down and report on weird and true mysterious stories, from glitches to the paranormal. Did you know you can support the channel by joining? If you enjoy the videos, it's something to think about. On to the stories. This is my channel's weekly compendium, ending Monday, January 16, 2023.
Case file number 920, written by Hot Honey Buns 1. More evidence of the universe losing cohesion. My adorable, but easily stressed out wife and I have been puzzled by this. Downright mind-boggled. We live in a small Wisconsin suburb in a home that we own together. We're in our 30s. I'm a roughneck, blue-collar man. I enjoy beer, beef, and sports. Despite this being rather common, I am who I am. My wife works for a Fortune 500 corporation in human resources. She works only part-time from home. Although we don't yet have children, hopefully that will change soon. I bring all of this up to show that we are regular people. Given how absurd the event that occurred was, I felt compelled to say this. I had the day off from work and my wife was off too. We decided to make a day of it by relaxing. Ordinarily, we'd plan an extravagant and expensive outing, movies and dinners. Hey, it's getting damned expensive now with inflation and all of that, not to mention gas prices. So, home-cooked dinner, a stew, and a movie, cuddled up on the couch. Yep, that works too. After dinner, we curled up on the couch watching Die Hard, which is by far the best Christmas film, when the TV image becomes distorted. We purchased this brand new TV a few years ago, so it isn't even very old yet. All the bells and whistles included, 4K smart TV, nothing had ever malfunctioned before. I tried fidgeting with the remote and turning the TV on and off, but the image remained the same, which irritated me a little. The sound was still incredibly clear. I was irritated that I had to move out of the cozy bundle of blankets my wife and I were curled up in to try to fix the TV. I had gotten up and already started to approach it when it fixed itself. Okay, that's cool. Then I hear my wife ask, "What is that next to the TV? Do you notice that?" She was pointing towards a little unoccupied space close to the TV. There, I too saw a tiny spherical ball of nothing. Black. Have you ever seen the TikTok clips where they make ultra-black paint drawings on surfaces and attempt to create optical illusions with it? Like creating the illusion of a hole in the earth when all that's there is paint? That is how it appeared, but it didn't matter from what angle you looked at it. Instead, it appeared to be floating next to the TV rather than being painted to the wall. It was quite small, possibly the size of a pinball. I walked up close to it, but I didn't dare touch it. My wife and I were transfixed by this pinball of nothingness. We don't know what time it was when this thing appeared, until it ceased to be. A few minutes, probably. We were deeply unsettled by whatever that was. Did it also mess with our TV? But really, what did we just see? Has anyone else seen something like this? We mention this to each other every day. Case file number 921, written by Cracker Bear. On Christmas Day, our family broke gravity. This happened on Christmas Day. The entire family had gathered at my grandparents' house for the annual holiday feast, and I do mean a feast. We're a family of ravenous eaters, proud and shapely folk, let's just go with that. As such, the dining room table was overflowing with dishes. I'm talking about everything from Christmas deviled eggs to mashed potatoes to honeyed ham to Watergate salad. You name it, we got it. Even cranberry sauce that only one person seems to touch, and somehow we never see who it is. We were all enjoying our supper when something weird happened. Extremely weird. Without warning, the dining room table lifted itself up about an inch off the ground. Everyone stopped talking and stared in amazement as the table hovered in midair for a moment before falling back down. And bear in mind, it wasn't some graceful slow fall. It's kinda crazy how loud and rumbling an inch of freefall from a whole dining room table can be. Everyone else saw that, right? Grandma said first. I think everyone was scared to admit they did. We all spent the next few minutes wondering what could have possibly caused this. Uncle Chris thought it might have been a small earthquake, while Grandad thought it was a ghost. To be fair, my grandpa is heavily into the supernatural, according to Grandma. He doesn't talk too much about that with us. As we continued to talk about this freaking nuts situation, the table lifted itself off the ground again. This time staying up for several seconds before once more falling back down. "I think it's trying to tell us something," Grandpa said, but winking at the others. Somehow, he's not terrified by this like the rest of us are, or at least if he is, he's trying to diffuse the horror with humor. And it was working. Everyone laughed a little, but still with that tension in the air. Everyone took a plate and we moved the remaining supper over to the living room. Not something my grandparents like doing, mind you, but given the circumstances. The good news? All of the dishes had remained intact on the table, more or less. Some cracks in a few plates, but at least nothing fell off besides a couple slices of ham, which Porkchop promptly dispatched for us. Porkchop, oh, he's a Yorkshire Terrier, by the way. Who needs a Roomba when you have a Porkchop, my grandma always says. The other good news. The table remained firmly bound by physics the rest of the evening, and since we left, as updated by my grandparents. You know what I found so odd about this? Outside of breaking gravity, it's that pets always respond first whenever I hear about paranormal accounts involving ghosts or beings that we can't see. Maybe that's inaccurate? Or perhaps there was nothing supernatural about it at all. In that case, I'm just baffled. Has anyone else experienced the dining room table just lifting off by itself? Or other furniture, I guess. Bonus file, written by Sexy Poker, my granddad, the master of time. My whole system was shut down after my grandpa's funeral. I struggled to accept that he had actually passed away while I sat in the restaurant with my family, trying to reconcile the reality that he was no longer among us. If you've never lost someone truly close to you, it feels like your insides are being pulled, twisted, contorted, and then eviscerated into mush inside your own chest, and it never stops. My mom and dad suggested going to a restaurant after the funeral to try and take our mind off of it. I wasn't hungry at all, so I just had a salad. Sitting there trying to digest both the food and the sorrow, the entire restaurant gradually froze in time. All the sounds of silverware clinking and people talking eventually came to a total halt. Everything was motionless and silent. Waitresses were in mid-step at an angle where trying to pretend to be frozen just couldn't work for any real length of time. My mother and I looked at each other. We spoke or tried to, but no sound came out. We sat there for at least a few minutes until finally everything unfroze and the sounds of the restaurant resumed as if nothing had ever happened. My heartbeat was absolutely not frozen during this, that's for sure. In fact, to the absolute opposite. At least I know my heart is strong, even if it's shattered. We looked around the room, but no one else seemed to have acknowledged anything out of the ordinary. Time had simply paused, but just for us, and we couldn't shake that feeling that it had something to do with my grandpa. God, I miss Grandpa so much. We live next door to each other, so it wasn't the typical situation of only seeing him a few times a year when possible to break off from the obligations of life and school. I'd love to believe that this was him saying goodbye. Maybe I needed that. Maybe my mom needed that too. Maybe that's reading too far into it, but honestly, it's what we will choose to believe. It makes all the difference in the world. File number 922, written by Violet Avocado, my brother, the Lord of Chickens. So this happened to me when I was 15. It was 8 p.m. like that. I'm outside our house and saw my elder brother outside as well. We know it's evening and cold outside, but as for us, we do usually go outside topless, just chilling outside. We saw our cousin, so we started to hang out. We're singing while my brother's playing the guitar. Then suddenly, my brother just stood up and bolted to a chicken coop. Just stood there facing the chicken cage. I thought it would be a good idea to scare him, so my cousin and I hid and were ready to scare him. A little note, the cage where he is standing has only one way in, and that's where we are hiding. So we waited and waited, because we thought he was just relieving his bladder there. We waited for 3 minutes, but he was still just standing there. We got bored. Then suddenly we heard my family laughing inside our house. I turned to look up at our house and heard my brother laughing there as well. I know it's my brother because he has this distinct laugh. Can't mistake it for anyone else. I got chills in an instant and pulled myself up to look. Then my brother, who I thought was standing in the chicken cage, was gone. Nowhere to be seen. I ran back to our house. My cousin followed closely behind me. Then he was there in his sweater. I asked my mother if my brother just got there. She said he was there all along with them. In fact, he never went outside at all. I told them he was with us and playing guitar with our cousin. I told my brother to stop lying, but I realized he's not by the look on his face. My family looks confused, so I just brush it off. Then my cousin told them what happened too, the same story as me. Case file number 923, written by Lock and Key 16. Can the universe alter a memory? All of my life living with my folks, they had this long oak table in the kitchen. It's beautiful. It had intricate carvings along the edges and a glossy finish that shone in the sunlight. We used to do our homework on the table, have Sunday dinners around it, and play board games on it late into the night. I have vivid and clear memories of dominating my mom, dad, and sister in Risk. I even remember when they started to refuse to play with me. So you can imagine my total confusion when I came home from school yesterday and saw that the oak table was gone, replaced with a sleek glass one. My parents were sitting at the new table acting like this was normal. I asked, "Hey Dad, where's the old table? Did we sell it?" My parents looked at each other, then back at me. "What old table?" my mom said. "The oak one? The one that's been in our kitchen since the dawn of time?" My dad let out a small chuckle with hints of confusion, saying, "That was never an oak table, son. It's always been a glass table." I stared at them, thinking this has to be a joke. No way. I remember it being wood. I used to run my hands along the carvings all the time while eating dinner or playing board games with you. But my parents just shook their heads and insisted that it had always been a glass table. I can't wrap my mind around this. It is impossible, inconceivable that my mind created every single memory, hundreds if not thousands, of this distinctive oak table that was always glass. The only thing that sprang to mind was to search through my phone and Google Photos Drive for images of the four of us seated at the table. When we got together for special occasions like my birthday or holidays, we took a lot of photos. This is proof. Every image I could locate depicts it as a glass table. I'm really going insane. I won't discuss it with my family ever again. I can't tell you how it makes me feel since I can't rely on my own memories. What do I even do? Case file number 924, written by Wifey Bosom. Can a friend be in two places simultaneously? I was out for a drive one day, just enjoying the nice weather and clearing my head. Dealing with some relationship drama, but that's neither here nor there. I decided to stop at the mall to do a little shopping and maybe grab a bite to eat. As I was walking through the parking lot, I spotted my friend Rachel. We chatted for a bit and caught up on each other's lives. Rachel was not my best friend, but we do get along and it's pleasant to talk to her. It feels a bit weird trying to describe the level of a friend, if you know what I mean. But just to say, we both like each other and see each other rather consistently, at least once a week. Rachel had some errands to run, so we said our goodbyes and agreed to meet up later. Fast forward a few hours and I'm sitting at the restaurant waiting for Rachel to show up. She's running late, but that's not unusual for her. Finally she arrives and we sit down to order. As we're talking about boyfriends and the ridiculousness of relationships, hers was rocky too, I asked her what errand she was running earlier today at the mall. "What are you talking about? I didn't go to the mall today. I've been at home all day." "Huh?" I said in my own brain. "But I saw you there. We talked for a few minutes. Stop playing." Rachel said, "That couldn't have been me. I haven't left the house all day, I swear. I was crying in bed. But I do know I was feeling rather irritable given how insistent she was being. I described her outfit and the location where we had spoken, but Rachel said she never left the bed besides the shower. When she received my text stating the time and place to meet up, she did respond with, "Sure, okay, I'll meet you there," which seemed a little strange of a wording to use given we had already agreed to meet up later, just wasn't sure on what restaurant. I dropped the discussion as it was clear one of us is wrong, but no one would give an inch. I decided to go back to the mall the next day. I walked through the parking lot, retracing my steps from yesterday. And there it was, the exact spot where I'd seen Rachel. For a second, I wanted to pretend to be some private investigator, checking to see if there were cameras on the light post or something, but no, there was nothing. Not that I could have accessed the footage anyways. That's sad, I guess. What else can I do? Did I meet a doppelganger of one of my friends? We spoke for at least 5 minutes and whatever it was, knew intimate details of her life. Her boyfriend's name, where she lived, etc. Case file number 925, written by EasyNat20. The universe casts a spell. Darkness. My group of friends and I were deep into a Dungeons & Dragons campaign, huddled around the table in my basement. We had been playing for hours, completely immersed in the world we had created, to the detriment of other responsibilities. I can't claim we're the epitome of health, but we enjoy life and the fantasies we create from it. Besides, this is a once-in-a-month event. It was my turn to make a choice. I was just about to roll the dice, perception roll, when everything went completely dark. At first I thought the power had gone out. Then I realized that the darkness was just in front of my eyes, but it was complete. It was like some kind of veil had been placed over my vision, blindfolded without a blindfold, with no edge where light peeks through. I heard panicked whispers from all my friends around me. "What's happening? I can't see anything. How are you doing this?" I reached out and touched the table in front of me, trying to orient myself and make sure reality still existed. Thankfully it did. I didn't really feel any discomfort, just stress and total confusion. I said, "Okay guys, I'm not crazy, right? No one can see anything either?" Everyone pretty much terrifyingly stated yes. Then the darkness lifted and my vision returned. There was no warning. I blinked a few times, trying to adjust to the now painfully bright lights of my basement lamps, which really were rather dim. We set the ambiance intentionally so for these D&D sessions. And no, we don't cosplay as elves and orcs, although I might want to. My friends were all looking at me and then each other. No one was speaking. I spoke first after the light returned. So we're all agreed that we all went temporarily blind and that we're not crazy, right? Everyone nodded. We went upstairs. It was evening, dark out, which added to the tension, I suppose. None of us had a clue. Collective delusion? Something in the snacks we ate? It's never happened again. Even though it took us a few days to feel relatively sane, we're all right now. We joke around with Mick, who always plays as a warlock, that somehow he has actual real powers in life and showed us a glimpse of his curses. Case file number 926, written by Confused Milky. Can a human being teleport? It was just another ordinary day at the office, clear skies and terrible coffee. I was working on a task with my colleague, Sandra, when she vanished. She was sitting across from me on our computer, typing away, and then she was gone, just like that. I blinked a few times thinking I was hallucinating. But she was no longer there. I looked around the room thinking she'd just left for a moment, but there was no sign of her. To be clear, I didn't see her literally fade away. I was looking at my computer screen, having just seen her seconds before, looked back over, and then she's gone. I'm pretty damn sure she's not a ninja, so it was odd, and I started to get a little worried. I sent her a text and asked her where she went so quickly. Thinking maybe something had happened to her, I got up and walked around. I checked the kitchen, then the bathrooms. I know it seems excessive, but the way she left felt so abnormal, especially for her. She never seems to use the bathroom or get up for much, that I wanted to make sure everything was okay. Maybe she needed help with something? Eventually, I found her asleep in the conference room, which was empty. This made no sense. It was mid-afternoon, not lunch break or a normal break. I gently woke her up, thinking she might be ill. I told her, "Why did you get up and leave your desk so quickly? Are you feeling okay?" She says, "I don't remember that. The last thing I remember is reminding you of the Q4 report deadline." She had mentioned that to me a couple minutes before her vanishing. Neither of us really know what happened. She agreed to get a medical checkup just to be sure, but to me the weirdest part is how she left the desk. It was so quiet, and she'd have to pass by my peripheral vision on my right to leave. Our desks are aligned next to each other and blocked by a wall on our left side. But I saw absolutely nothing. How is that possible? Bonus file, written by Analytics Fun 42, The Devil's Laptop. I'm a uni student, just a typical dude. I'd been studying and playing video games, mostly Overwatch 2, the past few months. Tonight I was working on my laptop, listening to classical music while I typed away, working on my assignment. Music helps me to focus. One song ends, and then there's nothing queued up after, which is odd. Spotify always queues up another one no matter how many I've been listening to. I thought it was a Wi-Fi connection problem. My Wi-Fi was disconnected after all. Not that big a deal. I can set up a hotspot through my phone network if I need to. Before I could get that set up, I started to hear a low rumble, very low frequency sound. I realized that they were coming from somewhere deeper within my laptop. It was kind of like some static or feedback, but it was so distorted and harsh that it sounded unsettling. The noises were amplifying, getting louder and more erratic. I couldn't find the source. I tried closing all of my programs and restarting the computer, but the noises persisted. So I turned the damn thing off entirely. It's still producing this absurdly scary noise. I have no other speakers, just AirPods, but they were making no noise. Whatever this noise I was hearing became muffled if I put the AirPods in my ears. I unplugged the laptop and held it at arm's length. It felt hot, even though it was unplugged and turned off. Maybe something happened to the battery? The sound just wouldn't shut the hell up, like a damn fire alarm warning beep. I felt like Phoebe from Friends, but with a much more expensive device. And in a much more strange circumstance, because this noise was rattling inside of my body. It was unlike anything I've ever heard before, and I wish I could describe it better. I can say it didn't sound extraordinarily loud. Potent would be a better word. After about an hour, it gradually started to fade out. I was trying to distract myself on my bed by scrolling through Instagram while waiting for it to stop. My thinking was the battery was drained, so whatever was causing the noise stopped from lack of energy. But I booted the laptop up to test this theory, and it booted fine. There was still 85% battery left. I didn't plug it back in until after starting it up. So yeah, that's it, some kind of demonic laptop experience. Never shared the story with anyone, and I never plan to outside of here. Case file number 927, written by Ollie Outsider. Let there be darkness. I've spoken to about 5 other people about this, and I'm convinced it has to be some kind of warped phenomenon. Maybe there's an actual term for it, but I haven't been able to find it. Have you ever been going about your day, and the sun just kind of blinked? Sometimes I'll be in my room, looking away from the window, and for a millisecond, my whole room goes dark, like something flew in front of the sun. A friend of mine says sometimes he'll walk down the street and the whole street will go dark for just a moment, a blink and you'll miss it. And it doesn't happen often, but when it does, it feels like the air kinda shifts, like something is different, but I can't quite put a finger on it. Anyways, I feel like maybe it could be some kind of mental phenomenon like déjà vu. I recently spoke to a friend from Australia, let's call him Eric. He mentioned he also has an experience where the sky goes black for him, like all the stars and the moon just kind of disappear for a moment. I've never experienced that, but I thought it was worth noting. I don't think it's a plane flying overhead. Now that I think of it, that doesn't make sense because of the way light diffuses. The sun, an extended light source, very far away, would not produce a complete shadow for a high-altitude aircraft. Most planes fly very high, and especially because I don't live near an airport, a completely dense shadow would not hit the ground. It's not a sufficient explanation. I'm talking dense enough to make everything within at least a mile's radius, by some accounts, look like night. Case file number 928, written by Petra. The Eyes of Truth. This happened about 7 years ago, in 2015. I, a woman, was in the compartment of a Dutch train, together with 7 other unknown train passengers. The automatic interior door of the train, the door that connects one compartment to another, opened. A homeless, handsome-looking man around my age, I used to be 56 at the time, wanted to sell us a newspaper to make some extra money. Nobody was interested, until his eyes lingered on me in a strange way. He got down on his knees and asked me to marry him on the spot. The other train passengers chuckled. I asked this man why he proposed to me. His answer has haunted me for years, and to this day I still have no idea what his answer meant. He told me that I had the same eyes as him. My feelings said at that moment that he meant this symbolically. I told him in a nice way that I already had a boyfriend in my life. He turned and left the train compartment. Sometimes I think of if only I had followed him for more information. Case file number 929, written by No But Stuff, the credit card with a mind of its own. I was working at a pub last Friday. Later on in the evening, it was quieting down. Only I and the other bartender were present. While I was speaking with and dealing with clients, she was doing things like cleaning and stocking. A lady sits at the end of the bar, orders one drink, and asks to pay off her current tab. I hand her her check. She hands me her card. I put in her card in the chip reader. The credit card slips print. I hand them to her. I see her put her card back into her wallet, and she thanks me and then signs the slips and gets up to leave. I reciprocate the thanks and pick up the credit card slips from the bar to enter my tip. I return to the computer 30 minutes later to find 2 slips printed out and a card protruding from the chip reader. The lady had already paid for this tab, and because of the way our system works, it is not allowed to cash out the same tab twice. It's impossible. To make sure I wasn't dreaming, I checked my credit card slips, and sure enough, there is a slip where she typed a tip and signed it. The next day, she comes into the bar really confused and says, "I could have sworn I put my card back in my wallet last night, but I can't find it anywhere. So I just wanted to check and see if I left it here by chance." I explained to her that while I did have her card, I absolutely watched her put it back into her wallet, and we both kind of lost it a little for a second, unable to come up with an explanation. Case file number 930, written by Soul Keeper, The Great Jordan Mystery. So basically, I work as a sneaker restorer. In our shop, there's only 2 of us who work here. So there's this Jordan 1 triple white that's really messed up that our customer wants to be customized into Jordan 1 patent bred. The customer pays it in full. I start working on it. I finished customizing the pair by January 8, 3 days ago. It's wonderful work I've done there. I took 4 pictures of it before I put it on a sneaker stand. My coworker and I adored it for a while that same day before we proceeded to work on other sneakers. Just yesterday, as I opened the shop to start a new day of work, I was looking for that custom J1 patent bred I did. I couldn't find it. Then later on, my coworker came in. I asked him and he told me it's on the stand I put it on. Then we went there, and yes, there it was, but not restored. It was a Jordan 1 triple white. My coworker and I were just blown away by this. We both thought the Jordan 1 I customized was stolen. I start saying curse words. Then my coworker picked up the J1 triple white on the stand and we began to check if it was a customer's pair, and yes it was, because it has this particular styled up swoosh, creasing and ripped leather, and a yellowish sole. We both questioned the simple reality of what just happened. I checked the picture on my phone, but there was nothing there. I know I'm not daydreaming because my coworker was there with me all the time. My coworker asked me what I'm going to do now. I said screw this random happening. I'm going to work even harder. Glitches be damned. Case file number 931, written by No One Here 21. Not even the Lockpicking Lawyer could pick this glitch. Last week I was sitting at my desk working on a project for a job as a graphic designer. I had been sitting there for hours and was starting to feel a bit restless. I decided to take a quick break and stretch my legs, get some fresh air. I got up from my desk, walked to the door and stepped out into the hallway, then closed the door behind me. As I walked down the hallway, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Sort of a pervasive aura, an atmosphere of anxiety. I turned around and walked back to my office door. I reached out to grab the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. I tried again, but it was like the door was locked. I was confused because I knew I had closed it behind me without locking it. I pulled out my keys and tried to unlock it, but the key wouldn't fit into the lock. I tried the door handle again, but it still wouldn't open. It was like something didn't want me to get back into my office. Just then, one of my colleagues walked by and saw me standing there. I explained the situation to her, trying not to sound nuts, and she tried the door, but it wouldn't open for her either. Naturally, she asked me if I had somehow locked the door behind me. These aren't the type that automatically lock when closed. Only the door that opens to the whole office floor does that. We called the building's maintenance worker to check on the issue. He looked at the door and said, "What's the problem, ma'am?" We both tell him that my office door is locked, even though I don't remember having locked it on my way out. I always test the handle to make sure it isn't locked before actually closing it. He attempts to unlock it with the key he has designated for it, but it doesn't open either. The key fit inside, but it wouldn't turn. So he tried the master key, and that one worked. The entire handle had to be removed and switched the following day. It's altogether bizarre. When I got back inside my office, nothing was altered or taken as far as I could tell. Did some force try to keep me out by destroying the internal mechanism of the lock? Whatever it was, it made me feel sick. Case file number 932, written by Low IQ Alert, Quantum Love. My dad and I stopped at a drive-thru on the way home. Moments after, I began to experience increasing levels of wildly unfounded anxiety to the point that it leaves me dizzy and nauseous. They handed us the wrong order, so we will have to wait a short while. I'm sitting there feeling terrible when I suddenly get the urge to call my sister. She had gotten into an automobile accident and was trying to phone us. She was just shaken, whereas some people suffered major injuries. I instructed her to stop talking and move away from the car as much as she could. She didn't understand, but she persisted in attempting to reach some of her friends. There was a huge boom, followed by shouting. She told me what had happened after the whole thing was over. She slammed the gas, drifted, and smacked the bottom of the car on some rocks while trying to impress several girls in the car. She, leans that way, which is completely fine. This completely wrecked the engine. Only my sister had minor bruises as a result of the incident. She said that she was in front of the car, just inches from the hood, when I instructed her to move out of the way. This was the first time I'd ever had an experience like it, both before and after. It's just a really strange memory. I can't even recall what I was thinking. I seem to remember it as if I were watching a movie and seeing everything in myself from a different perspective. Case file number 933, written by Grapes and Fear, the prison that glitched my life. I was a prison officer working at a detention facility in a tiny town in Ohio. I arrived at work at 9 p.m. I worked the night shift. When I showed up for work that evening, my boss appeared perplexed and questioned my presence. "I work tonight," I remarked. "But they said that you called in a few hours ago to report being sick," he said. It must have been someone else, feeling a little puzzled. It was a little strange when everyone else arrived for work that evening, but we carried on as usual and assigned everyone their positions for the evening. I reported to work in the control room, my standard post. The control room is located in the middle of the prison and has direct control over everything, including the cameras, doors, and phones. I looked at the message that claimed I called in, after removing the on-duty guard and settling in for the evening. The system noted I had called at 6:50 and explained that I had become ill while out storm cleaning. The previous night, there had been a storm that was quite bad, but not so awful that I had to go outside and clean it up. It was genuinely odd. Around that time, the supervisor took over. We got to chatting about it and how strange it was because he was also a friend of mine outside of work. While he was still seated there, I made the decision to phone my wife at home, telling her about this. I made a call after picking up the phone. A man answered the phone after 2 rings and responded, "Hello?" For a little moment, I was at a loss for words. I double-checked that I had dialed the correct number by looking at the phone, and I had. The person repeated, "Hello?" after a little interval, in the same raspy voice. I said, "Hello? Who is this?" The individual asked, "This is Taylor. Who is this?" Taylor is also my name, which caused my head to spin. I nearly screamed, "Where is Anne?" My thoughts were racing the entire time as I dashed to my car and drove quicker than I was legally permitted to my house. My wife was sitting in front of the TV when I burst through the door. She was surprised to see me there. She responded that nobody had been here when I questioned who was there. and went to call the prison to let them know what was happening after having a very lengthy conversation with my wife, but the phone was dead. When I returned to work, Dave was acting strangely, and he questioned me. How the heck are you doing this? He claimed that when he picked up the phone after I left, the caller sounded just like me. He was kind of scared and disconnected the call. He saw my car leave the parking lot a minute later. From my house, I had called back and questioned what the heck was going on. He hung up and told me to quit prank calling. And then I was feeling a little irritated and sick. We returned to work when I persuaded him that I genuinely had no idea what was going on. I later discovered that the storm the previous night had damaged the phone line in my neighborhood. So who had I been talking to? The oddest thing that has ever happened to me, without a doubt.
Case notes for file 920. Evidence of the universe losing cohesion. Right, so we're back to the dead pixel of spacetime. This was a story I read a few months ago. There was this person, I think was heading towards his garage, and in the archway that was heading towards it, he looked up and he saw a tiny dot, like a pinprick in the universe. And it was just this dark, dead pixel of spacetime. At least that's what I called it. This seems very reminiscent of that, although it seems described as larger than what he described way back then. He was more like a tiny, tiny dot, versus this being a pinball sized. So this anomaly, if it is the same anomaly, seems to be growing in size, which is very concerning. And way back then I told everyone in my notes that it terrified me. It's one of the most terrifying, screw ghosts or demons or whatever, a dead pixel in spacetime? Hard to get more terrifying than that. That just shouldn't be happening. I wonder if it's literally the exact same anomaly that the other person saw. They didn't say where they lived. I don't know if this thing can travel, if it's the same thing it's growing in size, or are there multiple of them? This is the second time I've heard this. There's only 2 stories that I've seen. There probably are more events that people haven't said, posted yet. This is very creepy. What do you guys think about this? Do you think it's evidence of it destabilizing? Case notes for file 921. Our family broke gravity on Christmas. Your granddad sounds like a pretty awesome person to be around. Supernatural and humor together. Good stuff. Let's go. But you're absolutely correct that pets, especially cats, but dogs too, they have a keener sense of entities beyond our dimension that we can't see. So indeed, the fact that Porkchop didn't react at all, I mean, I don't know, maybe Porkchop is just lazy. I assume even if pets have this ability, it doesn't, or the sight, it doesn't mean they're all going to react. Maybe if they're a very chilled out dog, he just wouldn't react. But I do lean a bit more towards this being some sort of actual physical universe glitch where gravity was somehow turned off at the bottom level of the table, but not fully, because the plates and everything, you didn't describe them as floating, still on the table pulled, well, pulled is a misnomer for gravity, but they were drawn to the planet on the table, but the table itself was levitating. Sort of like if you have one of those levitating spinning plates, you can add things on top of it, and they're still bound to the surface of the platform they're floating on, even though the platform itself is floating. They're kind of cool. You can buy them on Amazon, little spinning like UFO saucers that are magnetically lifted. So I don't know if the magnetism is involved here, probably not, because it's just a table. What could cause this? It's very unclear, but it's pretty cool. And if you think about it, an object de-rendering and duplicating, moving between parallel universes, is it really that much more unusual for gravity just to turn off for a little bit? I don't think so. An object entirely disappearing is a bit more trippy, and it seems to be happening all the time. Case notes for the bonus file. My Grandad, the Master of Time. I could speculate a lot here. There have been other accounts of people who have experienced frozen time, or at least time that's slowed down. Often in restaurants too, which is curious. Maybe it has to involve a lot of people around. Who's to say that those people didn't experience losses in their lives too? Maybe this is related to your granddad's soul trying to send a message, and this is the only way he understands how to do it right now. It takes time, I'm sure, to adapt, even if it's just a fragment of your granddad. It would take time for that fragment, that sentience that still lingers behind, to understand how to use their abilities. You don't just hop into something and know exactly what to do right away. It's one of my favorite episodes of Supernatural, and has to learn how to actually interact with the world. You don't just know how. It takes time to learn it. It's a skill, like anything. Regardless of all that, I just want to say that I'm very sorry for your loss, and I do believe this could possibly be related to your granddad sending a message. But even if it's not, he's okay. He's either in a new reality, or maybe just a part of him is left behind, and I'm sure he loves watching you and live your life. The best thing you can do is just live a great life. I think that's the best thing we can ever do for anyone that moved on. Live our best life. That's what they would want. Case notes for file 922. My brother, the Lord of Chickens. I think we're all experiencing a lot of multiversal thinning, I guess. Keep having to make up words to try to describe what's going on. Universal peering, multiversal peering, I guess, is more accurate. But in all these transitions, it seems applicable. People are constantly seeing into other universes, moving through them temporarily, not in quantum immortality, but literally their physical bodies and objects too. De-render, go to other universes, duplicate there, but it's really just moving to one to the other. They look identical, so it just looks like the object multiplied, but it's not really that. I think in this case, you probably did see your brother. He was interacting with you, and yet he wasn't really there in your universe. The other case is potentially astral projection, but I think because of the amount of interaction, he was playing a guitar. It seems more likely you were seeing your real brother just in a different universe, that's all. It's simple, but it's crazy. Case notes for file 923. Can the universe alter a memory? I think about quantum immortality almost every day. It fascinates me so much in how it can explain so many glitches. Does it explain this one? Are we dealing with some sort of memory alteration? Or did you just move to a new universe where in that universe, the glass table or the oak table was always glass? I mean, that seems possible, especially given that the photos do confirm that you had a glass table, you were always around it, even though your memories indicate otherwise. Could the universe itself somehow alter the memory? Because as we transition between universes, our memories remain intact. I think that means that it's just information. The soul is like a transmitter for all this information about us, who we are as people, and our memories, of course, our past experiences. If that's the case, then it wouldn't necessarily involve a transition to a new universe. If information is so readily available and downloadable into a new human body or mind, then yeah, it's conceivable that that information is simply being loaded into your brain. I don't know why it would be, I'm just saying it's a possibility. Maybe you are in the same universe, but the memories were altered. Personally, I think that's even more terrifying. I don't want anything wrong with my memory, or any possibility of it being manipulated. It would be a new type of glitch entirely, and I'm not okay with that. Case notes for file 924. Can a friend be in multiple places simultaneously? I think there's 3 types of doppelganger explanations. The first being an actual physical manifestation in the world, perhaps a spirit that took place, perhaps a demon. And the second would be an astral projection, where these projections do appear to have some effect on the world. They can interact with objects to some extent, and they can even make sound like when they're walking on a road or on a floor. And then there's universal shenanigans, where you can see other people in different universes. They're not really in your universe, but they exist. It's a universe just as real as ours, just a different one. I'm not sure which one this falls into, but I know it's not the first one, because in the first one, people know something is wrong. If they see this doppelganger, they know it's not supposed to be here, and it probably has malicious intent. There's instinct that people have regarding these things. Case notes, file 925. The universe casts a spell. Darkness. I would love to believe that there's real magic in real life, that there's a Hogwarts letter still coming my way. I know I waited a long time when I was a teenager. It never arrived, and I'm still rather irritable about that. What can you do? I definitely wouldn't be a warlock. Would not be in the Slytherin camp. Maybe Gryffindor, maybe Ravenclaw. Hufflepuff is just kinda there. No one really wants to be in it, but they're not a threat. Know what I mean? Maybe they'd make good cooks, I guess. They want to please others. Nothing wrong with that. So, discounting Mick's warlock prowess, there's many stories about this where the sun kind of flickers off and then people in this specific area are plunged into total darkness, often described also as without audio, although you guys were able to speak to each other, so it might not be related, but it does seem very similar, at least in the light spectrum. Indeed, I never thought it had anything to do with the sun itself. I think it's some sort of block on processing light information. I guess in a sense, everyone was made blind. And a disturbing thought, what if this is related to the dead pixel in space-time? Or recently on Tuesday, we learned that there's a pinball-sized version now. Maybe it was really large for a second and then shrunk back down. Maybe it was there and no one noticed it, if it's small enough. I don't know if it varies in size quickly, dramatically, what exactly it is, but it sounds like what I would think would happen if you're inside of it. Case notes for file 926. Can a human being teleport? So I don't think we can discount the mundane possibility that you were just extremely engrossed in whatever project or assignment you were working on, and you blocked out peripheral vision and sound. It can happen. Though, if that was the case, I imagine it would happen to you more often. But maybe not, because you say that she never really gets up. Now, that explains it to an extent, how she could leave so suddenly, but it's not really an explanation for why she was sleeping in the conference room. That is weird, and not remembering going there? I mean, yeah, maybe it is a medical issue, but that does make it a bit more glitchy to me. If I had to assign it a glitch, it would be probably a DOP, and affecting a human being, and this has been known to happen. There was a story a really long time, like one of the first ones I read, where a kid was going down a water slide, never came out of the other end. Even though other kids eventually were pushed through, they went through fine, and then eventually the kid did emerge like 15-20 minutes later, like nothing happened. So they really were in the slide, de-rendered completely, and then re-rendered later on. I don't think there was any description of how the kid felt after, but if I had to guess, if this happens to someone that they probably don't feel particularly good after, so if this happened to her, and maybe she re-rendered in the conference room, a bit further away but still pretty close in the same general area of the office, well yeah, she wouldn't feel good. I mean, can this just happen to anyone at any time? Can you re-render anywhere? Disappear in your chair and then re-render up in the sky and just fall down to your death? I've never heard of that happening, thankfully. So maybe there are rules, sort of, governing how this can work, but I still don't think it's intentional. Something weird is going on there. Case notes for the bonus file. The Devil's Laptop. So I do doubt that a demon is responsible for this, but perhaps a spirit or malicious entity, or just a spirit trying to communicate with you. Maybe someone you know. We know in many stories in the past where spirits can manipulate the EM spectrum, and they are literally just reverberations, energy in the spectrum, which is just excitations of a field. But energy can be converted to and from. It's just matter has so much energy, it's ridiculous. So that could be partly why it's so hard for an entity, a spirit, to interact with the world, because there's just a small amount of energy there, and they're only a fragment of the soul of whoever passed away. So given that, yeah, it'd be hard to manipulate the real world, hard to move objects and stuff like that, but a laptop, moving the electrons, controlling those to the specific state where it's just binary code and able to influence a program in a computer, I could see that. And yet the laptop was off, but the battery is still there, so there is energy. Maybe they can interface with that without using a lot of it, and that would explain why it was still feeling very hot, even though it was off and unplugged. Presumably, you don't mention having to replace the battery later on, so that's my guess. There was some entity trying to connect with you, but couldn't quite figure out how to make it say words. It was just weird, random noises. If you can control the EM spectrum, it doesn't mean you can figure out how to make it produce sound, like talk through it. That would probably take eons to figure out, if it's even possible. To manipulate it to produce random noise? Sure, I could see that being possible. Just from like a desperate spirit trying to communicate. Case notes for file 927. Let There Be Darkness. This is a fairly well-observed phenomena at this point. I should try to invent a name for it. Maybe light collapse event? Personally, I'm of the mind that it's in the brain, something is interrupting the processing signals. In this case, it doesn't sound like it was total and absolute darkness, more of a extreme dimming. Made it look like it was nighttime, but I assume you could still see like the outline of things, shapes in the distance. Whereas in other cases like this, it's complete darkness and no processing of any light whatsoever. So maybe there's a gradient. Sometimes it can be absolute shut off of any processing of light signals, versus sometimes just a dimming, a diminishing of it. But what is the cause? Is there some kind of ongoing test by government or aliens? It is a bit creepy. Or is it related to the dead pixel of spacetime? Case notes for file 928. The Eyes of Truth. A simple event, and I'm not sure exactly the meaning of it. Would it relate to the homeless man having a strong connection or bond with you? Something intuitive? I'm of the mind that in the real world, if this is a simulation, we may know other players, and we may be able to sense if they're near us. So that homeless man in this simulation Maybe in the real world, he's a close friend, and you just know. And I do think the eyes, maybe subconsciously, were able to pick up on the presence of that soul. There's a reason why in lore, the eyes are always seen as the method to reach the soul, the connection to it, like a window. Indeed, it does make you wonder what would have happened if you had followed him. Of course, you were already taken, so I don't blame you for not doing so. It does make you wonder. It's all these series of tiny choices we make throughout life that completely alter the final destination. Or does it alter it? Are we in a pond? Are we in a river? If we're in a pond, maybe the waves will alter where we end up. If we're in a river, though, well, that flow is just gonna keep pulling us along no matter how many stones we cast or where they land. When the river ends, and we finally reach that waterfall, is there another river at the bottom? Case notes for file 929. A credit card with a mind of its own. So this is interesting. It's uncommon to have DOP and re-renders where there's multiple witnesses, but what struck me was that the credit card slips that you still had, and they were duplicated. Of course, it couldn't charge the card twice, as you mentioned. There's a hard limit on the software itself. So not only did the credit card on her end, the customer, vanish and then reappear in the machine, but there were two slips, even though the card was only charged once. The slips, the receipt, they duplicated, whereas the card simply de-rendered and re-rendered. It's a whole jumbled mess. The universe can't even decide how it wants to glitch. But I will say, I'm very glad that you confirmed to her that you saw her put the credit card in her wallet. That would help to reassure her that she's not going crazy, which is very kind of you. You didn't have to corroborate her story. Puts her at ease. Very good. Case notes for file 930. The Great Jordan Mystery. You know, I have to say props to you for taking your job so seriously. Just one person taking their job seriously doesn't really change much, but if everyone does, even if it's a mundane job, not very important. You know what it reminds me of? This classic movies from the 80s, Coming to America, where Prince Akeem is working in McDonald's and he's just mopping the floors and, in any task he does, cleaning the windows, he takes it so seriously. He puts all of his energy into it because that's his job, that's what he's doing. Taking pride in what you do, even if it's not the last thing you want to ever do, is important. Before I was a YouTuber, I was cleaning offices. That was my job for like 3 years. And it wasn't bad. I'm kind of an introvert, a night owl, so I could go in at night, no one was around, just do my thing. But I took it seriously. I tried my best to make everything as clean as possible, because that was my responsibility. And it doesn't affect much, but it affects the lives of the people that work there in the offices that I was cleaning. So no matter what you're doing, take pride in it. And then, if you don't like what you're doing, the job you have, obviously try to take steps to change jobs to something you like more. Wherever you are, put in that effort. It'll pay off, even just if it's in the lives of other people. Regarding the glitch itself, I would say, yeah, it's just a classic DOP re-render. Although the fact that the shoes shifted from what you had already altered to the previous ones, well, just classic universal shenanigans. In another universe, the you there didn't actually fix the shoes yet. They got a pair that's already altered, and then you got the ones that weren't. So in that universe, he had to do less work. Kinda lucky, I guess. Et bon, c'est la fin du vidéo. Je veux dire, ça passe bien. Ça passe vite quand même. L'année, là, ça roule tellement vite. Moi, je suis content. Tout va bien. Si t'as aimé la vidéo, passe un like, puis je te vois demain. Case notes are file 931. Not even the Lockpicking Lawyer could pick this glitch. So, the fact that nothing was taken from your office, there were no ramifications from not being able to enter, like you didn't miss a deadline or anything like that, seems like it's more random than intentional will. There's simply no clear motive to not want you to go into the office. As far as you've stated anyways. It's also not some state of quantum immortality where you're just in a new universe where the key doesn't work, because also the maintenance man copy of the key didn't work. So there was actually a real change in the locking mechanism. Something caused the pins in the lock itself to malfunction. I do watch a lot of Lockpicking Lawyer just for entertainment value. His presentation is hilarious. Kinda makes me feel a bit unsafe about locks because they're so easy to defeat. Well, most of them anyways. I'm not an expert in how locks work, so I don't know exactly what would have to de-render to affect a lock like that or just be altered at all. Because yeah, the maintenance man's key did work. And I also don't know about master keys. How do those work exactly? But regardless, it does seem like, in my opinion, that something was altered in the lock itself. And this isn't some universal transfer or anything like that. What could affect it? I mean, it's conceivable that something in the locking mechanism de-rendered and maybe re-rendered incorrectly? Or just didn't re-render at all? If you can insert the key, it seems like the shape is correct, but it's not pushing the pins high enough, I think. Something happened with the lock. Was it the random universe glitching, or some sort of entity that managed to alter the lock, damage it? I'm leaning more towards the former just because it seems more random to me than intentional. Case file number 932, Quantum Love. So if you don't know, in quantum mechanics you can entangle particles, which simply means that if you measure the spin of one particle, the other spin of the other particle, it'll be determined, the waveform will collapse for that one too. Now, you can't transmit information via this, but it does happen at great distances. Einstein himself called this spooky action at a distance. Because while you can't transfer information, it's still an effect that's happening regardless of distance. So even if it's greater than a light second, it'll happen instantaneously across the universe if needed. It is rather spooky. And given that, that's something that's entirely real, very well known by physics, by scientists, and yet we don't know how. Maybe wormholes connect these particles somehow, very tiny? But one thing is clear, there is a method to connect atoms together. Could it be translated to a higher macro-level state, where it's a human mind or the human soul? I think it's possible. And certainly there are stories that lead you to think that, like in this one, where you feel that anxiety, or like a mother knows that their son is injured or something like that. There's this connection that we do have, especially with people that we think about a lot. I think that thought is necessary. It reinforces the connection. Now that said, I think it's not just the connection. The connection isn't enough. You may receive the information, but your brain couldn't necessarily process it. So you have to be open to the idea to even be able to accept it. And then maybe you can process it. Even if it happens subconsciously, you'll feel it. Case notes are file 933, The Prison That Glitched My Life. This is kind of like a whole jumbled mess of universal chords, multiversal chords. You were talking to yourself in another universe, the lines were crossed with the phones, one universe where the phone lines weren't damaged. You were somehow talking through that phone line's connection to another person in a different universe. The whole thing just seems like a wild chaos event. And yeah, I would have been kind of creeped out too. One thing I'm wondering is, related to the storm itself, if you have a whole bunch of storms in all universes or many universes, would that link them together? If there is something that's able to permeate through the membrane that separates these universes, well, it probably would require a lot of energy. And what does a storm have? It has a ton of energy, and kinetic energy from the rainfall and the wind, and of course electrical energy from lightning. There's a ton of energy in a storm. So if you have a whole bunch of storms happening in a whole bunch of universes, well, maybe that's enough energy to weaken the membrane. And then you can get issues like this. I wonder if there's more accounts of universal peering or transference in storms, especially in like hurricanes or tornadoes. I'll have to look into that. It's a hypothesis, who knows. La vidéo s'est complie encore, c'est bon, mais j'en fais tellement, c'est bon. Si t'as aimé la vidéo, poussez sur le bouton like, puis c'est ça.